Good morning. Just kidding. It is 3 p.m. My sleep pattern's a little bit buggered, but I didn't want to make another video, sat here moaning about officials. However, not only do I feel forced to, talk about this, but the fact that I'm doing this just 2 months after the Crystal Palace game truly sums up the state of football at the moment. I've been supporting Brighton for about a decade now because there's a severe lack of football heritage in my family. I don't know how I got into football, to be honest. My mum never supported a team. My dad really was never really that interested. I'd occasionally watch football on the TV with him sometimes, but he couldn't be bothered to support a team. So I took a decision in my teenage years to start going to Brighton matches because they were local enough, they were within easy access, like travelling distance to the Amex. And as a person who was so obsessed with football, I wanted to, go along with friends sometimes. Most of the time, I'd even go by myself because I just wanted to support a local team and properly soak in the football atmosphere. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The the emotions, the highs that I've experienced as we've progressed as a club through divisions is ridiculous. From League One promotion under Gus Poyet to the dire football that we played under Sami Hyypiä to the incredible championship run we had under Chris Hughton. And now, arguably, we are playing the third best football in the UK right now under Roberto De Zerbi. So what a fairy tale story, right? It would be for little old Brighton to wrap up this, this fairy tale story in reaching the promised land of European football. That story was slashed in half yesterday, because it was another round of incompetent refereeing standards, and it's in favour of a top six club once again. Of course, I used to joke about like big club bias and conspiracies against making having some sort of protection there for top six clubs in order not to hinder their status. But yesterday made me think twice. Maybe this actually is a thing. Like, no Howard Webb apology once again will cover up how unacceptable refereeing standards were in every department during the Brighton Spurs game yesterday. It was truly unacceptable and has left a lot of not only Brighton fans but just footballing fans in a state of shock as to how bad the officiating was yesterday, to a point where you could actually claim match fixing for it. You could argue now that we've dropped 5 points against Crystal Palace away and Spurs away. Dropped 5 points. Obviously, points aren't given based on performances. Let's not get that straight. But on this occasion, we've had goals ruled out due to VAR human error, and that could end up being the difference between European football or not. So this actually gets to a serious situation where, is this a point where Brighton need to appeal over compensation? Because obviously the prize of European football is so great that if you miss out on that because of human error and because of poor standards of officiating, like, where do you go from there? Like, an apology really isn't enough at this stage, and we can't just pretend this is a Brighton thing, and pretend that this hasn't been ongoing since the use of VAR. We've had I have a good mate who's a West Ham fan, and boy has he gone through some shit the last couple of seasons. Now that they've been, obviously not this season, but the last couple of seasons, they were challenging for that top six status, for those European spots. And he was telling me all about some absolute look. VAR screws over a lot of people in situations. Not every decision is going to go your way. You're not going to think that every call is correct, but it just so happens for us in particular that it's just constant, consistent VAR errors now that we're challenging for a European spot. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know. I was actually working during the game, which is why you didn't get a match reaction. So I watched the highlights, and pretty much the comment section was flooded with Spurs fans saying Brighton were robbed and apologising on behalf of that performance. So it really does make you wonder if Brighton fans can see it, you know, if Spurs fans can see it, if neutral fans, pundits, even the Brighton players themselves can see that there are clear fouls and clear goals being disallowed here. Why can't the professionals? It's just so baffling, and the fact that I've slept on this and woken up still angry at what is going on, like I said, sums up the state of football at the moment quite simply. It's just a really weird situation to be in, you know. We'll start off with Mitoma's goal. A brilliant taken goal, and another perfect example of De Zerbi ball, where he gets his wingers to push forward, essentially act as like inside forwards, and push forward on the last line, making those runs in behind, which is why you've seen such a recent great output from Mitoma and March. Two things wrong with this one. Is this year, literally, I didn't actually fully realise myself until I saw pictures of it on Twitter. There is a literal, a fresh interpretation of what actually is deemed handball. So this area, from like the shoulder and a tiny bit and a little bit down, maybe till round about here, isn't deemed as handball. Everywhere else on the arm is. Guess where the ball hit Mitoma? Not only that as well, but he was actually forced to kind of shoulder it down, the ball down as the ball gets crossed in. He was forced to, because he was originally going to chest it. Romero pushed him in the back. VAR didn't look at that, did they? He's literally pushed him in the back because he's admitted defeat on Mitoma getting the run in on him. He's pushed him, his body's adjusted, so that now he has to shoulder the ball down because the ball's come behind him rather than his original planned action of chesting the ball down instead. It's still a very well taken goal, and it was ruled out again for reasons that the Premier League have made up but yet can't seem to follow. It's really strange, and it makes you wonder why players like Kane go down so easily, because it seems such a problem for refs to acknowledge blatant cheating if nobody hits the deck when they've been hit with contact, you know. We then had Welbeck's disallowed goal from the ball deflecting off McAllister on the way in, of course, on the way in from Welbeck's shot. Clear deflection, obviously, and firstly, replays show that the ball actually hits McAllister's hip. Maybe there was an ever so slight brush off his arm, or the shirt on his arm, his sleeve. Maybe there was a slight brush as well on the way in, but there is a clear deflection on the replays of his hip, which, believe it or not, last time I checked was not handball. And secondly, you know, even if you have judged the ball to hit his arm in that situation, what can Alexis McAllister physically do in that situation when the ball's being fired at him with such velocity, power, from such a close distance? You don't get enough time as a footballer to react to that situation, and his arm is barely in an unnatural position anyway. He's kind of like tried to close it in slightly in the limited time that he has, and yet it's just a weird rule, right? Because I believe that no matter what you're doing in that situation, if the ball does strike your arm and it's influencing the goal, then it is going to be ruled out. But in my opinion, that's just bullshit, to be honest. Honestly, the foul on Mitoma, I'm yet to see one person say it's not a penalty, apart from the officials, of course. I saw Robbie Savage and Chris Sutton actually. Chris Sutton was actually watching the game yesterday and calling out the officials on Twitter. I've honestly, I can't remember the last time, right, that there was so much, and especially for a 3 p.m. game that was untelevised as well, like so many people calling out officials on Twitter from a neutral perspective. This wasn't just Brighton fans going on about it. It was just clear daylight robbery that any football fan could see. Um, Twitter was a very weird place yesterday, and yeah, like I said, Chris Sutton was calling them out as well. He was watching that game, and I saw them saying on the radio this morning. It was almost like the VAR officials had quickly nipped for a slash or something while that foul had happened. So they clearly missed it. It's once again, if that foul's on Kane at the other end, it's a penalty, red card, points deduction, and De Zerbi gets a touchline ban until the end of the season. I'm sure of that. Speaking of De Zerbi as well, of course, he'd been going at it with Stellini most of the game. After Wells' disallowed goal, there was a bit of afters on the touchline, which got both managers sent off for failing to control their staff. Since when was that even a rule? Like, I'm sure like teams normally receive fines or whatever when their staff go a bit out of control or whatever, but I've never I could be completely wrong here. I've never seen managers get sent off because I've never seen managers get sent off for doing the mannequin challenge, especially Stellini, obviously. But I feel like De Zerbi wasn't really influencing much in that situation either, and to get red cards was just really bizarre. I feel like the ref really had like main character syndrome in this one. It was that was another baffling one to see, even from both teams' perspective. There was another foul on Dunk towards the end where he's made the run into the box from the free kick, had his shirt pulled and gone down. Very standard foul, seen them given loads of times. Could have had 2 penalties that game. You had Perisic flying in 2-footed on Veltman as well. Again, I've seen red cards given for those. And yeah, despite it being an untelevised 3 p.m. kickoff yesterday, will go down in Premier League history, which may sound like an exaggeration, but this really has all stemmed up just from a build-up of consistent, unacceptable errors from professional Premier League referees that are trying to destroy our fairy tale season. We should be here talking about a great performance against Spurs. Spurs tactically outclassed again. They really do play some bad football. I'm sure Spurs fans won't mind me saying. Tactically outclassed and outplayed for the majority of the game. But performances don't matter, of course, when your team isn't playing on a level playing field, So yeah, that was my initial thoughts, really. Like I said, I wanted to give time to kind of sleep on this one, and to be honest, me and a lot of Brighton fans, I'm pretty sure, are still quite angry at the situation, because we know that all we're going to get is an apology. Actually, no, we've already had an apology from Howard Webb. Woohoo, let's go, number 2 of the season. Maybe we can make it 3 in a few weeks. 3 of the best he's made them pay. Howard Webb's already apologised, already acknowledged the error on the penalty against Mitoma. For some reason, that seemed to be cleared as the only error that was made that game. That's just all we're going to get. We're going to get an apology and a fine for not controlling the stuff. But it's like our staff have a right to feel outraged because of the consistent errors that are ongoing. Like De Zerbi has more. I think I saw Andy Naylor tweet a stat that De Zerbi has more touchline bans than Spurs have had wins or something like that in recent months. I can't remember exactly, but I might link the tweet after. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. There's only so much you can talk about issues like these, but I do think that it's important that we continue to speak up on them, because it truly is unacceptable. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts, not just from Brighton fans, but from an outside perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. West Ham fans, Leicester fans, talk to me. Was this like an ongoing thing with you guys when you were pushing, trying to push the top 6 clubs out the way and trying to make a push for Champions League or just European football in general. We all saw how corrupt FIFA was in a recent documentary, and it wouldn't surprise us anymore if there was the Premier League doing dodgy stuff behind the scenes for monetary purpose, because that is unfortunately the way life works.